Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Blake and Vish Sports. This one's kind of another different one that, we don't always do these, but we're trying to do them a little more, especially with the offseason being a little slow right now. We do have a few good topics, though, that we want to start off with, but, first things first, if you guys do have questions or any, NBA, NFL, I guess, you could ask other sports. We probably wouldn't know them, but you can throw them in there. Just any questions, just throw them in the chat, and we're going to try to answer everything that we possibly can today. But the first thing we wanted to get started with was the Cleveland Browns. And so this basically stemmed from me and Vish talking about how good we think they are. And, are they a top team in the AFC or maybe they're not? So we're going to, I guess, discuss that now. But Vish, do you believe the Cleveland Browns are the best team in the AFC, and why?
I'm going to go and I'm going to say I do. I do. And it's not just on paper. I think this is the most complete football team maybe in the NFL. And they give me a lot of 2018 Rams, 2019 Niners vibes, even though I would say they have a slightly worse defense than both those teams, and they have a worse coach. I think they have a better quarterback than both those teams in Baker Mayfield. And so I do think they're the best team in the AFC. I know the Chiefs rebuilt that offensive line and all of that. I still have concerns with the Chiefs' linebacking core. Their secondary, while it's really good, I still have some concerns with their corners as well as L'Jarius Sneed played. Obviously, their safeties are good. Thornhill is excellent, and Matthew, we know how good he is. I have concerns with their weapons outside of Kelsey and Tyreek Hill. I think that's really bare this year. I think this is going to be the worst weapons Patrick Mahomes has ever had in his career, which is crazy because he has Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey. Yeah. But outside of that, I would say they have nobody. So I have a lot of questions with them overall. Not saying they're not going to be a very good team, but I think Cleveland's more complete from that standpoint. And then the Bills, similar thing. I still don't think the Buffalo Bills can run the football. And that's a problem to me. When you're going to be an elite team and you're going to play in the playoffs, you have to be able to run the football. And I don't think the Buffalo Bills can. So that's why I'm going with the Browns. I think they're the best team in the AFC. When you look at their offense, right, I think Odell Beckham coming back is going to add an explosive element to their offense that they were missing. Rashad Higgins is good. Donovan Peoples-Jones showed a little bit of something. Jarvis Landry is consistently solid. I just look at their offensive line. I say that's the best in the NFL. Jedrick Wills is going to be 1 year better. I look at their defense. I think Owusu Koromoa is going to make an impact. I think Newsom's going to make an impact. I think John Johnson is going to be phenomenal for their defense. I look at Denzel Ward, who I thought played great last year. I think he's going to be really good. And then their defensive line, their interior defensive line is probably their only spot of concern for me. But they do have the Aaron Donald type. I would say he's the second best defensive lineman in the NFL behind Aaron Donald, and that's Myles Garrett. And I think that he attracts enough attention to make their defensive line good. So I think the Cleveland Browns are the best team in the AFC. Now, they're going to have to go and show it next year, and I think they're more than capable of doing it. I think, again, if you look at what the 18 Rams did, the 19 Niners did, this Browns team is capable of doing that, and they have a better quarterback than both those teams. They have a more physically talented quarterback. Baker Mayfield's got a pretty strong arm, and he's pretty consistently accurate. He's got a stronger arm than both Jimmy and Goff. So I do think the Cleveland Browns are the best team in the AFC.
Interesting. Okay, so the two teams mentioned previously, Browns and so it was the Browns, Bills, and Chiefs. Those are also, I think, my top three teams in the AFC right now. I think you could. There's like the tier A, they're clearly a little bit above. And then after that, you can like throw the Ravens in there. I guess maybe Chargers. I think they might make the playoffs. And then there's some other teams.
Broncos, maybe.
Yeah, Broncos aren't bad if they ever figure out the quarterback situation. And then there's just other teams in there too that, maybe Titans, Colts even. I'd almost put them in the first tier, to be honest.
Definitely the Colts.
Yeah. But not to get too off track here. So I do like the Browns. I think their offense is about as complete as any offense in the whole league. Stefanski was awesome for them last year. I think me and you talked about this in one of our first things, like getting rid of Kitchens and adding Stefanski was probably like one of the biggest just 180 flips from head coaching. I mean, they had Hugh, then they had Freddie, and now they have Stefanski, and Stefanski looks to be the real deal. And that's huge for them. But where I have my concerns is defense. Now, they did make a ton of new signings, which I like the guys like John Johnson. He took less money to go to Cleveland. Have you ever heard anyone ever do that in their life, Fish? I've never heard anyone say, I really want to be in Cleveland and I want to go there for less money. That's just not the most glamorous city, and you just never hear that. So that was good for them. They also got Troy Hill to go in at corner. And then on the D-line, the two guys they signed were Malik Jackson and Jadeveon Clowney, which I feel at this point are more just like fool's gold, and their names are bigger than the actual production they're displaying. I mean, they really haven't done much as of recently. And, it's maybe a lot due to injuries and just getting up there in age. So I'm just not the biggest fan of the defense signings. Owosu Koromo is going to be awesome. They also got Anthony Walker, who's like a thumper linebacker, and then Malcolm Smith, and then a few other guys too. But I'm still not sold on this defense whatsoever. They have their secondary last year had tons of injuries. Same with their linebacking core, which struggled a lot. And as good as Denzel Ward has been, he's really struggled to stay healthy through and through. And that's where I'm like, okay, if he's gone and, Greedy Williams keeps getting injuries, same with Grant Delpit. If these guys keep getting injured, which has been kind of the sign for their whole careers, like their secondary is still not all that great. We don't know what they have in JOK, who I really like him. I thought he should have gone in the first round to them, honestly, but we still don't know how the rookies are going to be. And the D line is still just Myles Garrett versus the world, which I don't think can be enough to be a strong enough defense to actually get them that far. And I did want to bring up the Chiefs-Browns game from the playoffs, and what the Chiefs did to them was kind of crazy. Every possession that Mahomes was there, they either scored, kicked a field goal and made it, or kicked a field goal and missed every single time. And that to me is not a good sign. And I know they got a lot better, but this game might not have been as close if Mahomes was in there the whole time. Now, they did only have one possession afterwards, and it was a Chad Haney horrible interception. I think you remember this.
Matt Moore.
It was Matt. I'm pretty sure it was Chad Henne.
Was it Moore? Was Moore last year?
No, it was Chad Henne, because it was like the Henne thing is possible.
Oh, right. It was my bad.
No, you're good.
Matt Moore was last year, right? Matt Moore was last year when he played against the Packers and the Vikings.
Packers, I think.
Yeah, that's my fault. My bad.
No, you're good. But yeah, I mean, you remember that bad interception, and obviously, we can't play the game where like, oh, if Mahomes was there, they would have scored X amount more. But all I'm saying is their offense was firing on all cylinders, and this was without a running back there because Damian Williams was gone, and I think they had Bell injured and stuff like that too. So I guess my point showing is I don't have enough faith in the Browns defense yet to put them as the definitive number one. I think a team like, maybe the Chiefs defense isn't as great either, but they always somehow come up big when the playoffs are the best, and Chris Jones, and then for whatever reason, Frank Clark just turns a notch and just starts playing amazing. So yeah, I guess long-winded rant here is I'm just not sold on the Browns defense yet, but I completely love their offense. And I think the OBJ coming back is a lot bigger than people really realize. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So you talked about their defense, right? And I think it's just, we're betting on, like, I know you're really high on these players. I know you think John Johnson is very good, which he is. And I know you thought JOK was really good, which I think so too. Like, we both thought he was a top 20 pick in this draft. And so my thing is, like, it just comes down to the defense where I'm just going to bet on. I know Joe Woods is a good coordinator. I know that, JOK is a good player. I know that they just have the right nucleus of talent, and their defense is going to be protected by the fact that they're going to run the ball, and they have a super duper duper star on defense in Myles Garrett. And because of that, I think that they're going to run the ball. They're going to play smart. They're going to play. I think Baker Mayfield really found something at the end of last year that's a really, really good thing to move forward into. I think he can definitely be. I personally think Baker Mayfield is one of the top 15, 16 quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think he can be one of the top 12, 13 quarterbacks in the NFL next year. I think he can be close to as good as what Kirk Cousins has been for the Vikings or Ryan Tannehill has been for the Titans the last couple of years. I think Baker Mayfield's capable of being that good. So because of that, I really do think they're the best team in the AFC. I understand what you're saying about the defense, but I just look at JOK and how he fits in that scheme. John Johnson, how he fits in that scheme. I know the injury concerns with Denzel Ward. I know Greedy's been injured, but just top to bottom, like Denzel Ward, when he plays, is played such good football for them the last couple years. Yeah. And Greedy's got so much talent. And Newsome, you didn't even mention Newsome. I know you wanted the Packers to take Newsome. So I think that he's actually a perfect fit for their defense as well in terms of scheme. And so because of that, I really think they're going to win the AFC. I just look at this roster and I say, how can they not?
Yeah, they're stupidly talented. I'll say this. They're probably the most complete roster outside of Tampa Bay. I'd say Tampa Bay's roster just, top to bottom talent oozing everywhere. And most of its veterans is kind of the thing, though, that like when you look like, AB and Gronk and those guys, some of their defenders like JPP is a little older. And they have other guys too, but like Levante David too. But the Browns all seem like all their key guys that just will be there in that team for the next few years. They're all really young. Like Myles Garrett's just entering his prime. Same with Baker. I'd say Chubb. I think Chubb's pretty young too. He's still on his rookie contract. Hunt's not too old. And, just overall, like they're a really young and growing team. And I think that the AFC North will be a bloodbath for the next few years with all the like quarterback play. Maybe besides when Big Ben's gone, the Steelers might fall off for a little bit. But Burrow, Jackson, and they have Baker in there too. So AFC North will be, I think, as always, is the AFC North ever really bad? I guess it'll continue to be really strong.
Right. And then the other thing is within their division, and here's why I'm even more bullish on them. Like in reality, right, their division is tough. We talked about it. The quarterbacks are good and all of that. I still have concerns with Pittsburgh's offensive line.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how are they going to block people? And then I do actually have more concerns with Pittsburgh's defense. Like I think that they might take a step back this year, just given the fact that, I thought Bud Dupree was a key contributor for them last year. I know bringing back Tyson Alualu was big. Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt still beast. TJ Watt is fantastic, just awesome, fantastic player. But I think they're going to take a step back because I still have concerns with their ability to run the football with their offensive line. I know they got Najee Harris, but a running back isn't going to change their run game. No. In terms of Cincinnati, I don't know what Burrow is going to come back and be, so how can I bet on that? I still have concerns with their offensive line. Like, cool, you got Riley Reif. That's not making your offensive line that much better. Their defense, while it played pretty well at the end of last year, I liked William Jackson. I know he was inconsistent with his play, but losing him, Carl Lawson was outstanding last year. Losing him, I know Trey Hendrickson had a really good season, but I don't think he's as good as Carl Lawson. So I have questions with them. And then Baltimore, yes, I think they have the best quarterback in this division in Lamar Jackson. I really do. But here's the problem. I don't think Baltimore's offensive line is that good anymore. You bring back Ronnie Stanley, that's awesome. I'm not a big Alejandro Villanueva fan, especially at this point. You lost Matt Skura, who didn't even think was that great of a center to begin with. Since Marshall Yanda's been gone, yeah, you got Kevin Zeitler to kind of replace him, but he's not Marshall Yanda. I have concerns about their defensive line and the age of Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe. I have concerns there. Patrick Queen didn't live up to what he was promised to be. He looked little bit like a chicken with his head cut off at times his rookie season. So I have concerns there. So with Baltimore, I look at their roster and their receivers, I still have questions with their receivers even after you draft Rashad Bateman. So I have top to bottom questions with every other team in this division that I think could really, really handicap them. Where I look at Cleveland and I say, top to bottom, I look at their roster and I say, where's the real weakness here? So I think that their division also is going to be maybe easier for them than we originally anticipate.
I'm with you on that. And I think this is a crazy thought to have considering they were 12-0 last year. They started off 12-0 and they fell off the face of the earth. And a lot of people kind of called them a fraud team. And I actually kind of hate when, you say, like this is a bad 12-0 team or whatever. And, that was said a lot about one of the Packers teams. I think it was 2019. And, they made it to the NFC Championship game. They finished fourth best in the whole league. And I don't know, just saying that stuff's crazy. But with the Steelers, it actually looked like it was right. And
yeah, it's a legitimate team.
I never want to call out the Steelers and say they're going to go below 500 because Mike Tomlin, it doesn't matter if they have Duck Hodges at quarterback or Mason Rudolph, like, they somehow get above 500, but this year I'm seriously doubting they will actually make it. And I think your other concerns with like the Bengals, like, yeah, their O-line is one Riley Reif better. Is that really that much better from a quarterback who was getting mauled back there? And he got injured due to the bad O-line play. So I'm with you on there. And the Ravens, we've talked about this extensively on the channel. So if you guys want to look more into that, we've talked about like why Lamar needs more help, and their O-line obviously is not what it was when they had Orlando Brown, Marshall Yanda, Stanley, and they looked like, to be a top 5 line in the league. They're not that anymore. And yeah, they're a little older on defense too. I know Earl Thomas has come, but D-line's pretty old, and I guess they always find an edge who turns out good. But maybe Pernell McPhee will keep doing this for the next 5 years. We'll see.
Jason Oweh.
Yeah, Jason Oweh. But yeah, I think that was a great point, and we'll see how the Browns do. I think they'll definitely win their division, like without a doubt. But top of the AFC, I'm not completely sold on it yet. I got them in my tier 1 of teams. Vish has them number 1. But we'll see in a few months, I guess. And guys, do drop comments on questions you have. I guess when I first said that, there was not as many people as there is now. But drop comments if you have questions about, NFC, AFC. You can obviously ask Niner questions. We would be more than happy to answer those, as always. But we're going to move on.
Yeah, we have one more topic, and then we're just going to be taking your questions for the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm. But here we go. So this was kind of more recent news that the Vikings called the Panthers on draft night. They offered pick 14, pick 90, which is in the 3rd round, pick 143, which is in the 4th round, in exchange for pick number 8. According to this tweet, this is from My Sports Update, the move up would have been for either Justin Fields or Rashawn Slater. I have a hard time doubting they would have only done that, or they would have done that for Rashawn Slater. That's just my personal thoughts. I think it was Justin Fields all the way, and further proof of that is they drafted a quarterback in the 3rd round in Kellen Mond. So, Vish, what are your thoughts on this trade, a potential trade up?
So if it was Slater, right, Slater does fit their zone running scheme and all of that, but I'm with you. I have a hard time believing it was for Slater, and I only say that because they traded down and then Darrisaw fell in their laps and they took him. It didn't seem like they were very, very like, oh crap, we missed out on Slater. I need to now go get
a tackle.
Right, tackle immediately and take Darrisaw. They said, no. You can come up and take Vera Tucker, who's actually a little similar to Slater, except Vera Tucker, I guess, is a little smaller, so he projects more as a guard. But they were both that kind of guard-tackle hybrid where they're smaller athletic tackles or phenomenal guards. And they said, you can take Vera Tucker. We'll slide all the way back. Oh, look, Darrisaw fell to us. Now the value's too good. We have to take him. So I'm with you. I think it would have been for Justin Fields, and I actually think Justin Fields would have been an incredible fit for their offense. If you're looking at when we talked about Fields before the draft, obviously we don't need to keep rehashing Fields, but the point is, like, I really like Fields, you really like Fields, and we talked about how a Tennessee-style offense could be a good fit for him in the NFL. Well, the Vikings don't have the exact same style offense to Tennessee, but it's similar, and there's some things that are very similar, including the tight split 2 receiver sets and looking to push the ball down the field off hard play action. So I think Justin Fields would have been a great fit. I actually think Kellen Mond in the 3rd round was really good value for them.
Yeah.
I think Kellen Mond should have been a 2nd round pick. So like getting him 1 round later, in my opinion, is awesome value, especially with him going after Trask and 1 pick before Mills, 2 guys I thought he was just better than, flat out better than. Mm-hmm. So I think that was good value for them. But yeah, I think it's just interesting that they traded up so aggressively, because I think they do have a good quarterback. And I think if they stacked up their roster more, they can win with that quarterback. The only problem is, if you have right now they have a roster that's probably capable of going to the playoffs, and they have a quarterback who takes them as far as their roster is capable of going. He doesn't raise the ceiling of their roster, but he doesn't lower your floor. He just takes you as far as you're capable of going. And because for financial reasons and draft pick reasons, I'm not sure if they'll ever be able to get that one or two guys, that'll really, really put them over the top, because they have a lot of star players. They just don't have that complete depth of brilliant roster. And because of that, I think it's interesting that they went up to they were considering going up to get, if it was indeed Justin Fields. But yeah.
I agree with most of the points you brought up. First, I could start with the Fields. I would be very, very surprised if that move was for Rashawn Slater. Now, I know a lot of people had him going, 8 to even the Panthers. The Broncos had a need at tackle too, and you could honestly said the same about the Cowboys. But what I'll say is this: they would not have jumped. Like, it's just a very interesting spot because the Broncos were a team that you look at their quarterback room and they're one of teams that's maybe a quarterback away from being really something special. And they were in talks with other quarterbacks. So leapfrogging the Broncos kind of tells me that they were going for Fields in that case. And then getting on to the the trade in general. So they offered a 3rd rounder and a 4th rounder to jump up 6 spots in the first round, in the early part of the first round. It seems like kind of like a half, they didn't really put in too much thought to this trade and kind of just like, if they take this, wow, we'd be robbing them. But, we're not too concerned because the Eagles to go from 12 to 10 traded the 84th pick, which is a 3rd rounder. So they traded a 3rd rounder to move up 2 slots. They tried to trade a later 3rd and a 4th to move up 6 spots. So I don't know how serious they were about this trade because that trade offer screams to me that they really weren't like fully, they hadn't fully decided they really wanted to do this desperately and were making a fair offer. So for me, that was also interesting, and just the fact that it wasn't the best trade. And then going on to the actual, trade portion of it, I kind of see why they would go quarterback. Like, Kirk has 2 more years on his deal. They haven't really, when they originally signed him, this was after they made the NFC Championship game and they got waxed by the Eagles. And, they had Case Keenum, who played incredibly well the whole season, but, they were just missing that one quarterback to get them over the top. So that's what, Vikings fans believed Kirk Cousins to be. But their roster has been nothing like that I think it was 2017 or 18, 2017.
17.
Yeah, it has not been like that 2017 team. That 27 Vikings defense was something special. I think they had one of the best 3rd down percentages in NFL history. It was something ridiculous. But bottom line is that Kirk, I don't really believe, has been given the most fair of shots, especially behind that offensive line's pass protection. It is not good, to say the least.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's very bad. I'd say bottom 8 in the league. I don't know. I don't think their run blocking is terrible. I know you think maybe Dalvin Cook makes it look a little better than it is, and I'd probably tend to agree with you there.
But it is a good run blocking line.
Yeah.
I just think it's a terrible pass blocking line.
Yeah,
terrible.
Like, absolutely horrible. I agree with you, and for that reason, I don't really think Kirk's been given the fairest of chances, but regardless of whether he's been given a fair chance, they were adamant about drafting a quarterback and developing for the future. And I honestly think if they would have made a trade up for Fields, that would have been genius. You have Kirk, who maybe can't take you to where you want to go, and you have 2 years to kind of retool this defense, retool the offensive line, and then once he's off the books, you can just splurge in free agency, re-signing your own guys, and you have Justin Fields, who's sitting for either maybe 1 or 2 years, and he's ready to go. All the kinks have been hopefully worked out by then, and you have a cheap quarterback with a couple years of sitting on the bench, and who me and you thought were he should have been a top 5 pick. I think he'd go number 1 in a decent amount of drafts, at least top 3. Somehow he fell, but I really thought this would have been a great idea for the Vikings to do, and I would have been very disgruntled as a Packers fan knowing that Justin Fields is definitely going to sit for a couple years behind a quarterback who I think Kirk's really good. I guess those are my thoughts on it. Do you have anything else, really?
Yeah, I think you really covered it quite in depth, and I agree with it 100%. I think ultimately them not making the move, though, was best. And it's kind of weird to say, right? Because getting Justin Fields, in my opinion, would have been a good move. In your opinion, I think it would have been a great move. You just mentioned that. But I think for Kirk Cousins, the 2 things I don't think they've had for him is that elite defense. I think it's always been very good. And I don't know if it'll be elite because I have questions about their corners. I think they're older. Yeah. Harrison Smith is obviously still an unbelievable football player, but he's 32 and he's one of the most reckless players out there with his body. How long is that going to last? Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, two fantastic players, especially Kendricks, maybe the most underrated player in the NFL, a top 3 linebacker in the NFL. But like Danielle Hunter was out last year. They just don't have a great depth on their defense where if a Kendrick gets hurt, it's like, oh my God, well, what do we have left?
It kind of falls apart. Yeah.
Right. And their offensive line, again, it's not a good pass protecting offensive line. Darisaw is a very good pass protector. I think there's questions with Darisaw as a run blocker, but he's a very good pass protector. So that's a perfect fit for them. And yeah, getting Fields would have been incredible. But I think that Mon in the second round and then just kind of third round, and just kind of retooling this roster with Darisaw and just getting younger talent in both their lines. And hopefully a year from now, like when you're ready to move off of Kirk or 1 or 2 years from now, you can kind of be in a position and maybe there's another quarterback you go get. Because I think while getting Fields would have been awesome, I think it would have been a little premature given that there's still aspects of this roster that need retooling, specifically the secondary and offensive line. If they can do the retooling with Kirk there the next 2 years, Kirk probably is able to get them to the playoffs the next 2 years, but it'll be a very defined ceiling because without a great roster, I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. Maybe you get that roster to very good, and then you go draft a quarterback who can make the roster great from very good. So I think that at the end of the day, I think Darisaw was an incredible pick and a great fit for them and what they need, and maybe even a better fit because they got more picks than trading up for Justin Fields, who probably wouldn't have played for the next 2 years because beating out Kirk Cousins would be hard. So.
Interesting. So I kind of disagree with that it wouldn't fit the timeline. I think retooling an offensive line in their secondary would have been like the next 2 years would have been perfect if they just hammered that in the draft. Maybe getting more depth around. I agree with that. Like they're kind of one of those teams similar to how we talk about with the Niners. Like they have a lot of like star players that do make a lot of money, like the Kendricks, the Harrison Smith, the Danielle Hunter, Anthony Barr. They're paid highly. Thielen in there too, but they're paid highly. I guess Cook. I'll stop now. But they have a lot of guys, and this is a lot of teams too. Like there's a lot of teams that are maybe more top heavy, but if the Vikings defense loses Eric Kendricks, it just seems like it just falls off a cliff, like a massive cliff. And Eric Kendricks is really that good in my mind, but I think their defense is actually going to be much improved this year, and they can actually make a push to the playoffs. Like.
Right.
Think of their D-line adding these 3 guys alone, Danielle Hunter, Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson. They saw what Kamara did, and they said, that's never happening again. Because those 2 D tackles are some of the best run blockers run stuffers in the whole league. And Danielle Hunter had 14.5 sacks the last 2 years. So that's pretty incredible out of a pass rusher. And then their secondary was really young. Pat Pete might help. I don't think he'll be worse than the guys they were trotting out last year. And I still think Zimmer's a great coach. And I think if they really did get Fields, that would be fitting their timeline and being able to fix the O-line. I would be maybe concerned with their offensive weapons as Dalvin Cook. We don't know how he'll be in 2 years. You could say that about any running back, and then Thielen's age as well. But I think Justin Jefferson's going to be great for them for a long time. And Irv Smith Jr. finally getting the number 1 tight end role. He's a guy to watch out for, but we'll see. I just think if the Vikings did do this, and once Kirk's like $30 million contract got off the books and Fields slotted in, even with Mond, I think it's a genius idea.
Right.
And just that once they're off the books, they'll have a quarterback who should be ready to go. And maybe they get a bridge guy, some veteran to come in, maybe start a few games or go on the bench. But, man, the Vikings are set up really nicely for the next at least few years.
I agree with that. And I think even with Mon, like you said, like it could truly be special with Mon. Just one thing, obviously, before we kind of end this topic, I wanted to say is, like, obviously we know how special the down the field throwing is with Justin Fields, but can you imagine a run game of a read option play with Justin Fields sticking in the pocket of Dalvin Cook and you don't know who the ball carrier is on a play?
Crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That sounds like a Greg Roman offense to me, Vish. I don't know about you, because I think he'll probably be gone by the Ravens then, and they could get, Greg Roman's done it with Kaepernick. He's done it with Lamar, where, for like the first 2 years, their running game is just number 1 in the league. So Greg Roman will be calling if that were to happen. But yeah,
True.
we can hop off this now and we can answer some questions, guys. So keep throwing them in the chat. There's a few good ones.
I saw one really good one that I wanted to answer here from my buddy Pinor here. He was discussing with his buddy if Dak Prescott is elite or not. He thinks the needle has to be moved up because of Mahomes, Russell Wilson. How many elite QBs are in the NFL? So I'll ask you, how many elite QBs do you think are in the NFL?
I would say, I guess it depends how you define elite, but I would probably go with comfortably 5. I want to say 6. But if you could probably convince me otherwise because I haven't thought too much about this, but what would you say?
I would say 5 with a possible 6 because that 6th guy is kind of in a weird spot. So the 5 I would say is Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, at maybe 7 with 6 and 7 kind of being in weird positions. But I would say Mahomes, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and Aaron Rodgers. Those would be the 5 I would say for sure. The 6th guy that's kind of in a weird spot is Tom Brady, because obviously it's tough to count out his winning impact, but then what he's doing for the wins is maybe not as much as these guys, because we're getting into intangible impact and leadership instead of like what the quarterback is actually doing on the field and what he's doing for the offense. Because I mean, this is a guy who just won an NFC Championship game in which he threw 3 interceptions. Like, that doesn't happen for Patrick Mahomes. That doesn't happen for Josh Allen. That doesn't happen for these guys. So he's kind of the weird. And then the 7th is Lamar Jackson, because he's an MVP and he's kind of done the weird thing. But I don't think in terms of just making as many physically gifted plays with his arm and all of that, even though he is a good thrower, he's an underrated one. He just doesn't have the greatest scheme and weapons. He's just not as good as the 5 aforementioned guys who are just spectacular in Allen, Watson, Mahomes. This is no particular order. Rodgers and Russell Wilson.
Okay, yeah. I had the first 6 as you, besides I had Lamar instead of Tom, but I was thinking about Tom, throwing him in there. I don't know where I rank him. It's so hard to rank him, honestly, in my mind, just because as you've mentioned, there will be games where it's NFC Championship game. He'll throw 3 interceptions. He'll have like a 80 passer rating and they'll win. And you're like, well, he played pretty good, but at the same time, he threw 3 interceptions and they have like the best defense in the league. So it's kind of tough. But I guess we get back to this. So we both have 6 or 7 elite quarterbacks. Both of us do. Kind of the same guys. Do you think Dak should be in there, though? Would you put him in there, Vish, or no? I don't think I would yet.
No. To me, Dak is kind of the guy that could be in this group if you gave him an incredible roster with an incredible offensive line, incredible play caller. Like, he could put up a 45 touchdown, 5 interception season, but he's just not as gifted as these guys. Dak Prescott is the 7 to 12, the tier that Tony Romo lived in for years, Carson Palmer lived in for years, Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, these guys. I would say Big Ben's even closer, at least in his prime, to the elite group. Maybe he's maybe in the Lamar.
Most of the time he was in.
Right, he's maybe in the Lamar conversation where he's just there, but he's not exactly there all the time. I think Dak is just that a little tick below, but he's an unbelievable quarterback. You could easily win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott. I just don't think Dallas does a very good job with their roster construction year in and year out, which is why I think he gets screwed.
No, I'm with you, and I think I'd say him and Kyler are 2 of the guys that, if they could make or like carry their team to, I mean, honestly, if the Cowboys made the playoffs, I would probably consider Dak elite because that roster's kind of hot trash right now. And for Kyler, if they can make deeper runs in the playoffs, that's where I think I would start saying, all right, this guy is definitely elite in the sense that we just really haven't seen either of them do that. Now, Dak did make the divisional game against the Packers, and I really thought it was up in the air for taking, and that I'm kind of, it was his first year, but if this was Dak now and he couldn't win against those Packers, I would struggle because that defense was really not good. I mean, we all saw what the Falcons did to them in 2016. It was
to be fair though, as a rookie starting his first playoff game, Dak played unbelievable in that game.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, I was originally going to say that was bad, but he is a rookie, and that was really impressive for a rookie. But I think that's what a few of these guys are missing now. And you kind of need to see postseason success before you can say a guy's elite, because if they're not elite when it's January, then when does it all really matter what they can do in the regular season is kind of the bottom line.
Right. The only difficult thing with the postseason success is you have to also try and judge it fairly. So, like,
yeah, because there's a team.
Could they have realistically won that game?
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Right? Like, Deshaun Watson, could he have realistically beaten that Chiefs? Even though they were up 24-0, that roster he had around him was not going to compete with that Patrick Mahomes Chiefs team that won the Super Bowl. So that's where it becomes a little difficult. And, a guy like Russell Wilson, like, they probably should have beaten the Rams last year, but he was just not playing really good football in December. But then he's also Russell freaking Wilson. So I guess he's due to have one bad month and a half of football in his life because he hasn't really had that.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's also another good point. Like, I don't think me and you really harp on Stafford not being – he wouldn't not be elite because Joik Bell was his starting running back for years on end, or Reggie Bush or Javid Best were like the best guys he had. It's a little unrealistic to go in with that. And the Deshaun Watson point's great as well. Like, okay, his defense got 51 points hung on them. I think it was 7 straight scoring possessions in a row. Like, imagine being the quarterback, and every time you step off the field, it's just Travis Kelce beating a double team or beating your safety. Like,
and then dancing in your end zone.
Yeah, doing a potato sack touchdown celebration. That was one of the. They have some good celebrations.
They do.
Between Tyreek Hill throwing up like the little peace sign, and then Travis Kelce's always doing something, I don't know, moronic or funny. So that's just that. But good question, Pinor. So I guess to sum it all up, we would not say Dak Prescott is elite, but he has the potential to jump in there. We have like 6 or 7 elite guys. We said the names. I think that's
mostly everybody's name.
5 of them, everyone's having in there. 6 and 7. I guess most people would have Tom, but we're, I guess, think a little differently sometimes. But yeah, great question, Pinor. Sorry, I was going to pull something up. We can touch on this quickly. Who will the 49ers RB2 be? And this is a good question, honestly, because there's 3 guys who it can be. I guess there's 2 parts to this, Vish. Who do you think will be it for most of the season, and who do you think will be at day 1?
I think day 1 it'll be Trey Sermon. I think it'll end up being, in terms of touches, Raheem Mostert. So okay. Raheem Mostert might be the starter, but I think they're going to have a really, really if you remember Marquise Goodwin's career arc with the 49ers is actually similar to what happened with Raheem Mostert. At the end of 2017, Marquise Goodwin finished the season really strong. They gave him a contract extension in the offseason, and they were like, Marquise Goodwin's going to be like a receiver 1. 2018, Marquise Goodwin was hurt. He was in and out of the lineup. He had the one great game in the frozen tundra with C.J. Beathard throwing him the football against the Packers. That infamous Monday night game where the corner from Iowa, I forgot his name, but Greg Maben, he got absolutely abused by Devontae Adams down the stretch of that game. Right when
Jimmy Ward went out, I vividly remember this. Right as Jimmy Ward got out, it was literally just like Devontae Adams had like a 70-yard, 5-yard.
Right. And then coming into this offseason, they loaded up coming into 19, they drafted Debo, they drafted Jalen Hurd, and then they signed Emmanuel Sanders. They obviously had Dante Pettis. Before you know it, Goodwin was kind of lost in the pecking order. And all they said with Goodwin was, we're going to try to limit his touches so he can be the explosive athlete. I think that's kind of what's going to happen with Mostert. I don't think Mostert's going to get lost in the shuffle the way Goodwin did, because I think Mostert has showed a little more in last year than Goodwin showed in 18. But I think they're going to have a clear cap on Mostert's touches to keep him healthy, because his speed is so spectacular. When you do get him, he can take anything 80 yards, 70 yards. And because he can house call anything, you want to keep him healthy for every game. So I think Mostert will be capped at 10 to 12 touches a year. So by technicalities, he might not be the RB2, but in terms of touches, I think he would be the clear running back 2. Because I think somebody, whether it's Sermon, whether it's Gallman, or whether it's Elijah Mitchell, who I still haven't watched on my to-do list, but I say that every time. But one of those guys I think will end up taking, the bulk of the carries, even though it'll be 20, 30 more than Raheem Mostert over the season.
Interesting. Yeah. If the Niners did that, I honestly think that'd be the best way to utilize him because, as great as he is, he does not help the team if he's getting 20 carries one week and then he just gets injured the next. And, you wish that wasn't the case, but that's just kind of how it's been for his career. And you kind of have to take that into account when giving him touches. And so I could see him as the RB2. I still am worried about his injury concerns. So I'll say this. I think Wayne Gallman will probably end up being the RB2. And I think Sermon will try to be the RB1 guy. I guess the thing I keep harping on with him is his explosiveness, and his 10-yard shuttle is one of the best of any. And this is coming from his high school track coach. And I think this is carried on because his 40 isn't the best and what you'd think it'd be, but he's incredibly explosive. And in this offense where once you hit the hole, that's really all you got to do for them. And, maybe he's not the home run hitter guy Mostert is, but if he can beat someone or if he can beat people to the spot with his 10-yard quickness, then that's more than effective enough for this running game. So I'll go Sermon as the RB1, and then Gallman is kind of the guy who he's just all around solid at everything, jack of all trades, and will be able to handle a huge workload and actually get the carries to be the RB2. So I'm going with Sermon 1. Mostert's going to get touches sprinkled in there. I'm worried about his injuries, though, and then Gallman certified, second guy. Third if Mostert can't be healthy.
I think that's definitely fair. So I thought this was a really interesting question. Would you rather have Nick Bosa or Myles Garrett? And I think it's a complex question only because we have 1 year of Nick Bosa in the NFL, and that 1 year was special. It was fantastic. I mean, he was the best player in the Super Bowl. Possibly. He dominated that game. He was phenomenal in the playoffs.
Chris Jones, really good.
Yeah, he had a special Super Bowl. He had a special playoff run. And you have, Myles Garrett, who's had a couple years of consistency of very, very awesome play. Who would you rather have?
So I guess to preamble my question, because it's probably different than yours, but if it was for like one season, one game, all that, who's just better? I'd say Myles Garrett. I wouldn't even think twice. But if you sat me down and you said, all right, every team has, 0 players, we're doing a draft, I would be very, very, very likely
to take his contract, Myles Garrett.
Yeah. You can look it up, but I would probably go with Bosa just for the fact that he was injured last year and he does have injury concerns dating back to Ohio State, but if he's like how he is in year 1, I would take that guy for 3 years dirt cheap. I guess 2 years dirt cheap, and then 1 year, he's 5th-year contract, which is still way cheaper than Garrett, because I believe Garrett signed a $25 million a year contract, or maybe it was 20 or something. But I would rather take the cheap guy who's probably 90% as good as Garrett than have Garrett at 100% of the cost. And yeah, sure, I think Garrett's probably. It's not uncontroversial to say Garrett's probably the best whole edge in the league, and I would say that. But Bosa's in that top 7-6 category. I'd say around that spot. You can argue if he comes back, he could maybe propel to top 5. But what Bosa did in the postseason was special, and I put a lot of value in that personally. Just seeing, against the best teams, what can he do? Because it's that's what it comes down to in the postseason. You're not going against the team. You're not playing the Cincinnati Bengals O-line every week in the postseason. You are not playing against the Jets of last year or teams that just don't have the best lines. You're going against the best of the best lines. You're going up against Tristan Wirfs. You're going up against David Bakhtiari. You're going up against Trent Williams potentially. You're going up against the best of the best. And how can you perform when that spotlight's on you? And well, it looks like when he was in the playoffs and he was in the Super Bowl, I think he had over 8 pressures, 10 pressures in the Super Bowl?
He had 12 pressures in the Super Bowl.
That is unheard of. That is ridiculous. I'm taking him.
Dominated Eric Fisher.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say Eric Fisher's like a top 5 tackle, but he's, I'd say, probably a pretty good starting tackle in the league. So yeah, I'm going Bosa mainly due to the cap space issues and the fact that he is really, really good. He's a top 10 D-line.
Let me ask you this. Take out injury, take out contracts. We're just talking 2 individual players. Price is the same. I guess injuries is part of this, but just who do you want? Myles Garrett or Nick?
I think I'd take Garrett.
Okay, because that's where I'm at. I'd take Myles Garrett, and I hate to say it because I love Nick Bosa. I think Nick Bosa is the best football player in the 49ers. That's how highly I think of him. I don't
Mm,
think he's just top 6 to 7. I think he's a top 5 edge player in the NFL. The
okay.
only guys I'm taking above him for sure are Myles Garrett, Joey Bosa, TJ Watt, and then I think Nick Bosa is right there with anybody. He's there with
Preston
Khalil
Smith.
Mack. He's there with Chandler Jones. So I think he's there with Cam Jordan. He's there with Zadarius Smith. I think so. But the reason I'm taking Myles Garrett is so Nick Bosa is obviously the injury history, right? I mean, Myles Garrett is just 25, so he's only 2 years older than Nick Bosa. I think what separates Garrett is he's just a higher end athlete. He's got longer arms.
Yeah.
He's more explosive. He's faster. He's equally as strong. He's equally as good as against the run. He's what's the word? He's not technically as good as Bosa with his hands, but he's close enough where his upper echelon athleticism to me makes that large difference. I mean, Nick Bosa is a guy because of those shorter arms and because that lack of top end athleticism, he racks up a lot of pressures, but he's never had a 10-sack season dating back to his college days. Now, that's not everything for a defensive lineman. You just have to turn on the 49ers. You don't even have to turn on the film. Just turn on the TV copy, and you can see how special Nick Bosa is. So you don't need the sack numbers to justify it. But that's what makes Garrett special to me is that he can finish those plays a little better than Bosa. And then, so in terms of the sacks, right? I mean, Bosa dominated the playoffs, which he did. I don't want to put that in quotes as meaning like I'm diminishing that. He did dominate the playoffs, all of that. But he's also playing next to DeForest Buckner, who's an all-pro player. Eric Armstead, who's a very good player. And Dee Ford, who when he plays is a guy who's right around the top 10 edge conversation. I think Garrett has never had anybody special really around him. I mean, Sheldon Richardson has not been the same since he left the Jets. And here's what I think really separates Garrett. So you brought up the Bengals sacks and all of that. So a guy named Brandon Thorne, who I think is the best offensive line analyst, he's on Twitter. He does this thing every year where he watches film of like 35, 40 edge rushers who have a lot of sacks, and he judges their sacks in terms of based on film. So he judges them based on high quality. So like the player you're going against, whether you beat him one-on-one, because sacks where a guy runs around and somebody else got the pressure and he falls into you and you touch him, that's a sack. Those kinds of things happen. And Myles Garrett, out of his 13 sacks last year, he judged 12 as high quality. The next person with the highest number of high-quality sacks was T.J. Watt with 7. T.J. Watt with 7. So Myles Garrett had 5 more high-quality sacks than anybody in the NFL. So, we're judging between two players who are really amongst the best in the NFL. But I think that Myles Garrett, if you're being objective and realistic, I know Niners fans are about to be so mad, but Myles Garrett is just a better football player than Nick Bosa, and there's nothing wrong with that because besides Aaron Donald, Myles Garrett might be the best defensive lineman in the NFL.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with everything you said. I guess my only difference on when I take Bosa is if you factor in maybe age and cap space. But yeah, I think Garrett is. I mean, you look at the rest of the D line and you say, who else is worth throwing a chip or even doubling? And you say, probably nobody. It's basically Myles Garrett is the D line for the Browns, and it's all the tension. It's basically double him, sometimes triple him, double him, throw a chip, and then hopefully one of the other lock up the other guys 1-on-1, and that's just how teams can go against the Browns and pass protection. And yeah, I mean that's pretty tough when you're Myles Garrett and you're going against doubles all day.
There's a reason nobody has signed Olivier Vernon yet, who was the pass rusher on the other side of Myles Garrett. And this right here, this is just not true. And this is the problem when you only watch the Niners and Bosa was on TV all the time. Myles Garrett, so he only played 11 games as a rookie. Nick Bosa played 16. Garrett had 2 less sacks, 7 less quarterback hits, and 7 less tackles for a loss. It's pretty close. And Garrett did not play next to DeForest Buckner. Garrett did not play next to Eric Armstead. Garrett did not play with Fred Warner behind him. Garrett did not have Robert Saleh as his coordinator. He had Greg Williams. So when you look at all of those things, Nick Bosa, like his rookie year is one of the best rookie years we've seen from a defensive lineman. It was unbelievable. But Myles Garrett in 5 less games, 7 less starts was just almost as good with less help. So I think to say that Myles Garrett is better than Nick Bosa, I think if you say Nick Bosa is better, I think it's just a little bit of just a lack of you haven't watched Myles Garrett. Or you haven't watched him, because that's the thing, right? Not a lot of people get to watch the Cleveland Browns, and who was watching the Cleveland Browns in 2017 when they went 0-16?
People trying to see if they would go 0-16. I think those are the people who are watching them. But yeah.
So do you see any more questions? There's a lot of really good ones. We got to get back up there and go find them.
Yeah.
That was a great question, though, because I think we're talking about two of the best defensive linemen in the NFL for sure.
Yeah. This one, is Outsiders. How do you feel about Packers choking 2 straight years? I mean, I guess some people would be mad. You know, I'm just happy to see a team like making the NFC Championship game. Like, I guess this is just my mindset about it. Like, I'm not Super Bowl or bust, because otherwise you will just be unhappy as a fan pretty much your whole life, unless you're the Patriots of the last 20 years. But like, if all you want to see is your team win the Super Bowl, like, you will be very disappointed. Imagine being Don Burr. I mean, Don Burr is in here. He is a true Lions fan. Detroit versus everybody. If all he cared about was Super Bowls, he would probably not be the happiest guy. I guess I'm just happy seeing postseason games, seeing Aaron Rodgers extra and all that. And Don Burr might be onto something here. Detroit upset San Fran week 1. San Fran's not ready. Detroit's going to be different this year. It's different for Detroit, but yeah.
Don Burr, I hope Detroit has a good season, but there's no way they're upsetting San Francisco week 1. Although I do think it'll be a closer game than people will realize. I've talked about this a little bit before. I talked about it when the schedule release came out. We did a video on that, so go check that. But definitely, I'll definitely bring it up closer to the game. I think it'll be closer. But Don Burr, I'm sorry, buddy. Though I do hope your Lions do well. I just don't believe in Jared Goff.
Well, Vish, it's because they're not going to upset them. They should be favored. That's why it won't be an upset. The Lions will be favored, and that's why they'll beat the 49ers as per status quo.
My man, Outsiders is really upset about me saying Myles Garrett is better than Nick Bosa. Hey, I love Nick Bosa. I would like to say he's better than Myles Garrett, but objectively, if I watch them, I just can't say that. Agreed.
And I did want to plug this too. So Amin the Dream, 49ers guy, he recently had Vish, myself, Jesse, and then the Grant Cohn, on his channel for a little 49ers Dream Team Roundtable. Go check it out. Just wanted to say, you know, Amin makes some awesome content. He's a little younger than we are, so it's kind of funny, you know, meeting a younger fan about the Niners and talking with him about that. But definitely check out Amin the Dream's channel. You will not be disappointed. Some have gone as far to say he is mini Vish. So that's all you need to know about Amin the Dream.
Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing.
You never know, right? Yeah.
There were a couple more good questions up there.
Yeah, I'm up here.
About receivers.
Here's a good one. Here's a great one, actually. So if you were the Ravens general manager, what contract extension would you be comfortable giving Lamar?
So I hate quarterback extensions because in a vacuum, right, I'd be comfortable giving Lamar Jackson like what he asks, and that's probably going to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. And he showed last year that he can take a less than roster to the playoffs. The Ravens were lacking in a lot of spots last year, and Lamar Jackson took them to the playoffs. Well, his first year in the NFL, he didn't throw the ball as well his rookie year. Definitely not as well as he's thrown it the last 2 years. But that roster wasn't very good. They were 4-4 with Joe Flacco, and Lamar Jackson went 5. I want to say he went 5-1 to get them into the wild card game.
5-5, and then
they were 5-5, and he went 5-1. You're correct, yes. And Lamar Jackson went 5-1 as a rookie, and it was because of his special running that they got to the playoffs. The issue is that it's not just Lamar Jackson, it's any quarterback. Like, you give him the money, right? Like, Deshaun Watson deserved every single penny that the Houston Texans gave him. And obviously, they made a lot of mistakes in other areas, but Deshaun Watson's contract handicaps how they can put a roster around him. And that same thing would happen to Lamar Jackson. So it's complex in the sense that any quarterback, I think, if you give them that if you overpay them, in terms of like giving them that top dollar market money, which even though they deserve, it just becomes difficult. It inhibits you from basically building the kind of roster that you need for them to have the winning success that their legacies and careers deserve. But in terms of paying Lamar Jackson, I mean, this is an MVP. This is a guy who rarely loses. He doesn't have a turnover problem. He's won with less than receivers. He's won with the less than offensive line. He's won with a defense that's been inconsistent at times. Yeah, you can pick out a couple Chiefs games or a Titans game in the playoffs, but the overall body of work with Lamar Jackson is phenomenal. So I'd pay him. I'd make him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. I really would.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And if you're one of like the 5 to 6, not even 5 to 6, if you're one of the 7 to 8 best at your position, you can basically reset the market. I would put Lamar in there somewhere in that conversation, 6 to 7. We mentioned this previously, but you think of all the other O-linemen or running backs or receivers that are at that level of, maybe they're not the best, but they're like top 5. Yeah, they're going to reset the market. Because what are you going to tell your star player? No, we don't think you're as good as this other guy. We're not going to pay you more than him. Why would a GM ever say that? That would be ridiculous, and they probably wouldn't have a job for very long. So I'm with you. They should be comfortable giving Lamar, the money that he deserves, and what he deserves is probably to be the highest paid quarterback in the league. And what I will say, and we've talked about this too, Vish, is like paying quarterbacks, it's kind of hard to construct the team you need to win. Look about that with Aaron Rodgers. You could see that with even Drew Brees early on in the mid 2000s or 2010s when their defense was horrible. You could say that about any of the top paid quarterbacks. And I think the number is like 12%. No quarterback getting more than 12% of the cap has ever won the Super Bowl. Now it's not, a magic number that if you have more, you're going to not win. Matt Ryan almost did it with like 15%, but the bottom line shows like having a quarterback who's cheaper than the cap or cheaper than others and still performs at that level, or a rookie contract quarterback seems to be better. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to let Lamar Jackson walk for nothing. And so I would undoubtedly sign him. But I guess with Lamar, I would maybe not do like an 8-year contract. I would probably have it be like 4 to 5 years, in the sense that he is a running quarterback. He does take more hits than your Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and his body's probably more prone to breaking down than those guys just due to that simple fact. So I would be a little concerned doing the Mahomes like 10-year deal, where you're just basically giving him a key to the city. I would probably do 5 years, and guarantee you can't really guarantee less. Maybe the last year's not as much guaranteed, but yeah, I would be concerned having over like a 6-year contract.
Here's my question to you then. Do you think that the Mahomes tenured contract was a Mahomes-specific contract, or do you think that it was, like the new trend, like maybe if we just signed the guy for 10 years? Because I thought it was just a Mahomes-specific contract, because nobody else is – I seriously doubt anybody else will have the accolades of an MVP, a Super Bowl MVP, undefeated in the playoffs, on the road, and all of that or he never played a road playoff game, but only one playoff loss that came off of a D Ford offsides. I think that nobody else will have that resume for them to deserve that. Just basically, we're going to give you everything because we already know you're the best player in football, and we know you're going to be that for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. I think it will be the Mahomes special. I think even a 10-year contract for him was maybe not the greatest ideas, because it's 10 years in one of the most grueling sports where people's bodies break down a lot faster. And I'll compare it to baseball. Like the best baseball players will get like 14, 13-year contracts. And it's like, that is crazy, because someone will not be born, and then by the time his contract's up in a year, will have like a driver's permit. Like think of all that will happen in that amount of time. That is a lot of time to go by. And in the NFL, that usually doesn't happen. And I think the last few years there's not as much guaranteed, so they can keep restructuring it, and kind of like pushing more money, guaranteed money to the forefront. But yeah, I'd say that's probably more of a Mahomes contract. But I will say this to you: do you think 8 players are going to say, "Hey, look what Mahomes got. Why am I not getting something like that?"
No,
if they want to be the highest paid, because all the top 5 quarterbacks, when their contract's up, they want to be the highest paid.
So I don't think anybody wants to sign a 10-year contract either, because there's ways to be the highest, get more money than Mahomes.
That's true.
On a year-to-year basis than sign a 10-year contract. Because the idea is that you want to sign as many contracts as possible, because you want as many signing bonuses as possible, and you want as much guaranteed money as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to have a Kirk Cousins situation where you get a fully guaranteed contract. So that guaranteed money is going to dry out at some point. But if you sign like what Dak Prescott did, one of the things that was up for debate allegedly with Dak Prescott's contract is Dallas wanted to sign him to a 6-year deal. Dak Prescott wanted a 4-year deal because he wanted to re-up again when he was 31, 32 and try to hit the mark, hit goal one more time. Right. So because of that, I don't think anybody ever will ask for Mahomes' deal, because I think Mahomes realized that Kansas City is the best spot for him and all of that. And from that standpoint, like I don't think any other quarterback's been supported and put in as ideal a situation as Patrick Mahomes, where they look at it and say, I want to be here for 10 years. Like, yeah, Matthew Stafford signed a franchise contract. No offense, Don Burr. I don't think he wanted to sign a 10-year contract to put himself in Detroit for 10 years. Come on.
Probably not. They do have great pizza, but yeah, I mean, besides like just thinking of the team, probably not the best supporting cast over the past decade if he was there for that long. So yeah, I'm with you. And I think the thing that's true on that, or that you kind of can drive home, is like if Lamar, I don't even know how old he is, like 23, 24, say he signs a 4-year deal and he turns 28, that could potentially be the prime of his career. And imagine he hits the open market when he's 28. I mean, he will get obviously the next highest paid contract, which will be more. So yeah, maybe it's probably a Mahomes special that contract was, and Lamar's not going to get that. But I'd imagine like the average annual amount will probably be maybe a little less, honestly, but we'll see.
Yeah. And then my man Outsiders is making some Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood jokes. That's funny. I'm sorry, Outsiders. I know you're mad at me, but I got to stay objective. Don't worry. Our Niners are going to be really good next year. Hopefully Trey Lance is that guy. We'll be back, Mr. Outsiders. I know. You're my guy still. Do you see any more questions here that you want to?
So this was Amin the Dream, of course, asked a great question. Who's better, Devonta Adams or D-Hop? But I didn't even want to talk about that. This narrative is ridiculous. And I've actually heard this before, like people saying Devonta Adams without Rodgers will look average.
So before you go, we have a funny high school anecdote. So our senior year of high school, one of the things I used to like, Blake and I have a few sports jokes that we constantly used to repeat back and forth to each other. But one of the things I used to repeatedly tell him is, obviously I was half joking, half serious, but I used to always say it because it pissed him off. I used to always tell him our senior year of high school, Devonta Adams is just an Aaron Rodgers product. He's just another Randall Cobb or another I don't know who else.
James Jones.
He's another that type. Yeah, and I used to say that just to tick him off. But yeah, go ahead, Blake. My bad to interrupt you. I just wanted to share that funny.
No, you're good. And then there's other people who have said, like, Adams wouldn't even be close to top 5 without Rodgers. And, like his stats wouldn't be as good. Like that I can entirely agree with. But to say he wouldn't be good at all or that he would be average is just ludicrous. So obviously Devonta entered the league 2014. He didn't really have his breakout year until 2016. He had like a 1,000-yard season, 997. So not quite there, but, so if you guys remember 2017, Packers started off 4-1. They were looking good, and then Aaron Rodgers had a collarbone issue, and the GOAT, my favorite quarterback, Brett Hundley, came in, and he started playing for the Packers. And this was 2017, and his final season stats, 1,800 yards, 9 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And that's
except against the Steelers when Chris Collinsworth said that Aaron Rodgers couldn't have played better than this.
He did have 300 yards against the Steelers, which was honestly ridiculous. But Davante Adams ended with 880 yards, and he actually played incredibly well with Brett Hundley. So whenever people say like he'd be bad without Rodgers, like I would point to that season and say, okay, he did pretty good with Brett Hundley, and that was 4 years ago when he wasn't even close to what he is now. So yeah, that's where I'd say, okay, I just entirely disagree with you on the point, but I guess whatever. I still think Davante Adams would be one of the top 10 receivers, top 5 maybe. I mean, unless his quarterback was actually like Seneca Wallace, and he just couldn't complete a pass at all.
That's a name from the past.
Like Nate Sudfeld or something like that. Like
Nathan Peterman.
Quarterback's not completely like worthless and is can get the ball places. Like Adams will be good. Adams will still be good.
Yeah, I agree with you. In a joking community, I'd probably say that to you, yeah, he's just a product of Rodgers just to tick you off. But the reality of the situation is that he is, in my opinion, definitely a top 10 receiver in the NFL. And that's not because of Aaron Rodgers, it's because of Davante Adams. He's as good as anybody at the line of scrimmage. He's as crafty a route runner as everybody. He's got really good hands. He's really good at making contested catches back shoulder. I think him after the catch is really underrated because he's really, really savvy at making people miss and finding open spaces. The only thing Davante Adams truly lacks is top-end speed to just run by people. Mm-hmm. And that's where Aaron Rodgers' incredible ability to throw back shoulder helps. But Aaron Rodgers isn't the one getting off the line of scrimmage so smooth. Aaron Rodgers isn't the one who's so good at finding space within zone coverage and all of that. Aaron Rodgers isn't the one with the incredible hands. Aaron Rodgers isn't the one that, every other play you can throw him a slant and he can take it 15, 20 yards. He might not take it 80 like Tyreek Hill, but he can get you 15, 20 yards.
Break a tackle or whatever.
Right. Davante Adams is an incredible football player. He's a top 10 receiver in the NFL. I would say the only guys I personally prefer over him are like Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones. Those three for sure. Michael Thomas I would probably put in there. DK Metcalf for me is right around there, but I think it's debatable. But the point is that he's right there with anybody. Like I named 4 receivers who are 4 athletic freaks, and then everybody else, it's like, well, Davante Adams might be as good as him. So the point is that he's not made by Aaron Rodgers. They're a great combo. They have a great wavelength, but Davante Adams is a great individual football player, and then Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest individual football players we've ever seen.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and it actually will be very interesting to see how like the Packers, maybe running backs, O-line, receivers look without Rodgers, and who's actually legit, and maybe there's other guys who they were entirely made by just Aaron Rodgers being as good as he was, and you don't want to say that about a player, but if their production goes from 100 to 0 like that. And a guy who I think is to a lesser extent would maybe be Jordy Nelson. If you remember in 2017, the first 5 games of the season, Jordy Nelson had like over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, and he was killing it. Rodgers goes down and Jordy's nowhere to be found. And it's not that he's a bad receiver. It's just that he benefited a lot from his chemistry with Rodgers.
Right.
Than other people would. So just want to throw that out there. But yeah, I definitely do love all the Packers receivers, and Davante, I'd say he's probably been the best Packers receiver of the 2010s, to be honest with you.
I thought Jordy was a little better than him, but I thought Jordy was a top 6-7 receiver in his prime. It's not like like Aaron Rodgers. Like obviously Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. Nobody's debating that. But it's not like these guys are out here catching wide open, or Rodgers, they're not getting any separation and Rodgers just throwing them open. These guys also make a lot of incredible back shoulder catches. Rodgers, because he trusts these guys, he trusts the chemistry and connection he has. He throws, I guess, riskier passes per se, but they aren't risky because of his accuracy and these guys' ability to adjust to the ball in the air. So they're both incredible players. I don't understand why the quarterback has to make the receiver has to make the quarterback. Like Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin, or Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin, nobody's ever thinking of as a top 10 receiver. But their connection with Russell Wilson is special, and they help the Seahawks win a lot of games. Jordy Nelson, the same thing. How many times did we see Aaron Rodgers roll left and throw like a 60-yard laser, like on a flat line, a throw only he can make, and Jordy Nelson toe tap it on the sideline? And it's like, what defensive player is going to be able to do that? And it's like, well, yeah, Aaron Rodgers threw a laser, but how many receivers can toe tap making a hands catch with the ball traveling that fast and thrown that hard? So it's both of them. They're both incredible players individually. In a joking community, I would agree with you, Don Burr, but Adams is definitely a top 10 receiver in the NFL, and he would be without Aaron Rodgers too.
I'd probably throw him in their top 5, but, I guess it's to each their own. And you're forgetting, we didn't even mention Jared Cook. Awesome on the sideline too. Killed the Cowboys with the sideline toe tap. He needs to be mentioned as a Packer great. But yeah, good question to me. And although we didn't even have it highlighted,
good thought, Don Burr too.
Yeah, great thought, Don Burr.
So guys, go ahead. My bad.
No, I was about to go where you were too.
No, I was just gonna say, unless we see like maybe one more question in here, I think we should call it. Maybe we'll answer this and then call it if Jimmy G makes the NFC Championship. Okay. So this will be the last question we answer. So before we answer Tommy Huxley's question, Tommy, we see you in the comments all the time, so thanks. But we really appreciate all of you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, comment down below your answers to these questions. We'll definitely cut this up and put it as individual videos, and we'll be back soon. So we appreciate all of you. So now, Blake, without further ado, let me ask you the question. If Jimmy G makes the NFC Championship game, is he worth the first?
I will say no shot unless he actually just like balls out, and if he improves on what the 2019 season was and he's like a notch above that, then I would say yes. But do I think he will do that? No. And here's a bunch of other guys who have made a championship game in their career: Trent Dilfer, Blake Bortles, Case Keenum,
Jared Goff,
Joe Flacco, although he was magical, and if I was a GM, I might have thrown a first-round pick seeing what he was doing because that was crazy.
Brad Johnson,
Nick Foles. Do you remember it was the 2017 one? Who did if you looked at the quarterbacks, it was
Bortles, Keenum, Foles, and Brady.
Yeah, that was crazy. So we mentioned all those guys, but I guess the bottom line here is that unless you're the main driving factor of the reason, like the Rodgers, usually like the Bradys, like those, like Josh Allen this year, Mahomes, like those type of quarterbacks, I would say, yeah, they're obviously worth the first. They're the main reason they're getting there. But if it's the Niners, you'd say, well, probably not. It's probably their defense being very dominant, their run game being incredible, them having a great O-line, good receivers, good running backs, Kyle Shanahan, great offensive minds, and you're more of just the cog in the machine. I hate saying that term, but that's more of what it's like, instead of you being, the reason your team's getting that far with just brute force, and you're just, dropping 300 yards and dropping back 50 times.
So I think that's a great point. I'm going to maybe give it a little more of a shot, but I don't think it has anything to do with the NFC Championship game. This has more to do with Jimmy G as an individual player. If Jimmy G balls out and the Niners go 8-9, he could be worth a first-round pick, because it won't be Jimmy G's fault that they went 8-9. If Jimmy G plays inconsistent football the way he played in 2019 and the Niners make it to an NFC Championship game, I wouldn't say they would make it in spite him, as some people said in 2019. They made it with him, but he didn't elevate their ceiling. That's where I would say, maybe an end of a first for Jimmy G and early second, but that's around where his value would be. I think the NFC Championship game is kind of, I understand why you're saying it, but I think that kind of goal-oriented outlook, honestly, in this particular situation just doesn't apply, because Jimmy G can throw for 35 touchdowns and 4,000 yards and be playing amazing football and making awesome decisions and making big-time throws, and the Niners might not be able to support him And they might lose games. And that doesn't mean he isn't a quarterback that played like he is worth a first-round pick, because in that case, he definitely would be. I mean, 35 touchdowns, 4,000 yards. These are just random numbers because, like, Shanahan could scheme it up. But, like, what I'm saying is, like, he plays outstanding football. But you could also have the situation where, again, he plays inconsistent football, but you make it really far. That's not because of the quarterback, and that's not the kind of quarterback that you want to trade a first-round pick for. So I think ultimately that's where it comes to. I don't think the NFC Championship game is going to be the end-all, be-all here with Jimmy G. I think it's going to be his individual play. And if his play is good, we'll see it. We'll know his play is good. It doesn't matter how far the Niners go, because if he plays well, I wouldn't put it on him if the Niners lose 10 games next year. Just a random if statement. But if he plays incredibly poor and the Niners are still able to make the NFC Championship game, for whatever reason Trey Lance doesn't play and Jimmy G is inconsistent once again, where you have like the Halloween Cardinals game where he plays awesome, and then you have a game like against, say, the first game against the Buccaneers where you have 2 pick sixes, but the quarterback didn't play well at all, then that's where I think it becomes a little more complicated.
Okay, and I have a question for you, Vish. Do you think if immediately after the 2019 season, a team offered a late first for Jimmy, would they take it?
So Grant says the rumor around the league is that the Patriots offered a first for Jimmy Garoppolo at that point after 2019. And yeah, I'm not breaking any news or saying anything because he said this on his channel many times. And he said the Patriots, the Niners said no to them.
Okay. Yeah, that's that's interesting to think about, because like at the time, like what you thought you had in Jimmy, like you just took your team to the Super Bowl, like run it back and let's do it again. But obviously injuries and stuff like that took in place. But that's an interesting, I guess, clearly I don't follow the Niners as closely as you do. But that I would not have guessed that. I would have said probably not, but
I mean, a first-round pick for a starting quarterback, right? Like, that makes sense. Jimmy G, that's what he is. No matter what, I think even if he plays inconsistent football, nobody's going to say he isn't a starter in the NFL, right? It's not like Teddy Bridgewater where you say, oh, maybe he's a backup, blah, blah, blah. No. Jimmy G is physically talented enough and he's good enough at the position where you say 100% he's a starter in the NFL. So, like, a middle to late first for a starting quarterback isn't too excessive, especially because like the Deshaun Watsons and the Josh Allens would go for like 3 or 4 first. You know what I mean? So because of that, I don't think it's excessive. But from the standpoint of if you look at him next year, I don't think the NFC Championship is the scale or the barometer where you say if he reaches that, he's going to be worth a first, because I don't think that's where his value is right now. His contract is obviously, it might have to be mended a little bit because that would be his last year. But if he plays really good football, he could be worth, 2 seconds and a third or just a first, which depending on your draft positions and the value chart, both of those things could be worth the exact same.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And obviously, we are going more off the question at first, but it does come down to, his play. But I think that's interesting that he at one point was worth a first rounder because the Patriots offered a first rounder. And it's all about, we can sit back and say, is he worth the first or not? But if the Patriots offered a first for him, then clearly some people that are a lot smarter than we are thought he was worth the first. So that's interesting. Can he be worth the first again? I would say probably not, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities.
So I mean, what he was originally traded for at the time, the Niners were the worst team in the NFL. So a second-round pick at 33-34 is essentially
pretty much a
first-round pick. Yeah, it's almost the same thing. It ended up being, I think it was 38 or 39, I want to say correctly. That's where the pick ended up being. Sorry, it ended up being 42 or 43. That's where the pick was. But
yeah, they were essentially 9 or something, 0-10.
They were 1-10, yeah.
Jimmy
they were 0-9, yeah, and then he took them from 1-10 to 6-10. But yeah, so
they beat the 2017 Jags. They beat the Jags. They hung like 40 on him.
Yeah, they did. Kyle Shanahan was unreal in that game. No, but the point is, I think it just comes back to like, do you think trading for a middling starter is worth a first round pick? And I think you definitely don't. Like, you don't want to trade a first-round pick
not
to
for
get
$28 million. Not if he's $28 million, no shot.
No, see, and on my end, if you have a valid starting quarterback like Jimmy G, and I'm the Denver Broncos or I'm the Washington football team, where my entire roster is stacked, and I just have a question mark, because even though Fitzmagic was Fitzmagic last year, he could be Fitztragic next year just because of his gunslinger mentality and his propensity to turn the football over. And then Drew Lock, even though he has special talent, more talent than Jimmy G, especially in his arm, it's just so inconsistent. And you're just not sure if he has it to be that guy in the NFL, where if I have that roster, like, if I get Jimmy G, it's not like, oh, crap, we're going to be the best team in the NFL. But you know what? If I get a valid starter like Jimmy G and I have this roster, I could win a Super Bowl. I really could. Now, it's not the most likely thing, but with my roster,
they could go to the playoffs and win a game.
Yeah, 100% you're going to the playoffs. So because of that's where I would say I would trade a first-round pick. If he plays good football next year, regardless of the Niners record, I would if I'm one of those teams in that particular situation where I'm desperate.
I guess another person you could think of, like Derek Carr. I'd say he's better than Jimmy, but I'd pay a first and more for Derek Carr, probably.
I would too. I would 100%.
I'm just trying to think of someone like around Jimmy, because also with Jimmy's injury history, I would definitely not, because like obviously one game with a lot of one season with a lot of games, but like someone around his talent level, like a Baker Mayfield after his first contract, would you trade a first for that? I'd say there's a good argument to be made there. I'd say Baker's better, but
Yeah, his talent level is complex because he is more talented, than the Teddy B's and the Goff. But I would say he's a step below the Bakers and the Tannehills and the Cousins and the Carrs in terms of physical talent. So he's kind of in a weird spot between those.
He's in the middle of the middle.
Yeah, he's kind of in a weird spot between the styles of quarterback that play in the similar offenses as him and have success. So, but yeah, overall, I think we're both kind of on the same page here for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. But that was a great question, Tommy, and led to, I guess, an extra 15 minutes of the stream. But
yes, absolutely. So guys, again, thank you so much for joining us for this long. We'll be back soon. We'll be putting out some basketball videos. I saw there were a couple NBA questions that we weren't able to answer. We'll definitely answer them on our next stream. Thank you so much for joining us. Please like, subscribe, share, all of the good stuff. And we'll definitely be back soon. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.